Hey everybody, welcome to the August Okanagan Real Estate Investment Group Digital Event 2025. We are so blessed to have a really incredible speaker who reached out and offered to educate all of you, and I feel extremely privileged. It made me think about when I started investing in real estate. The only way to get this kind of information was to go to live events, and I would drive an hour to Edmonton and I'd go to a rain meeting and I might be able to hear somebody as smart as Cameron. Not always, a lot of times we did. And if I missed it, I'd have to wait six to 8 weeks for first a recording on tape and then further along a recording on a DVD. So that ages me a bit. I realize that. But here we are, and I feel extremely blessed that we're able to share this knowledge so much more easily thanks to technology. I'm sure you feel the same. So, without further ado, I want to introduce our speaker for tonight, Professor Cameron Morell. And if you're just entering the room, if you can mute yourself if you haven't already, I would certainly appreciate it. I'm just going to go really quickly through this. Curtis, good to see you. Glad that you're here. Cameron has been investing in real estate since the 1990s. He has called Canada home for the past 25 years. He used to be in another kind of life, a TV correspondent, and has since done multiple real estate investment and development. So he has a vast amount of knowledge spanning back literally decades. That's why I called this event Decades of Wisdom. So, thank you so much for being here, Cameron. And I'm just going to hand it right over to you. I'm going to be managing things in the background, folks. I'm probably going to turn my video off and just keep, if you haven't already heard me ask this, if you can please keep yourself muted, that would be super helpful. And then we will ask for questions at the end, depending on the amount of time that is allowed. Okay? And I will check in with you, Cameron, as well on time. Is there a certain amount of time that you need to be finished? I might as well ask you that right now.
No, I think we'll just stick to the plan of having everything done within the hour.
Sounds perfect. Okay. Well, thank you again and welcome.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction, Julie. Hello to those who are with us live and to those who will hopefully be watching the recording of this later on. Some of you might recognize me already from my presence in real estate circles in BC and different parts of Canada. I am a professor at the Sauder School of Business in the Law and Business Communications Division. And I've been doing that since 2010, so about 15 years now, all the way through the pandemic. It is my belief that if you are going to be a professor in a school of business, you should also be a business practitioner. And the business that I've been involved in for more than 3 decades is real estate in terms of investment and also in development. So you'll see on the screen my slide for my credentials as a professor. You'll see my hair is a bit grayer now compared to my headshot that UBC took for me. That was a couple of years ago. Here's my contact information for my real estate activities. So I'm a social impact entrepreneur, developer, and I run a private equity fund that invests solely in real estate. And that's called the Red Gum Mutual Fund Investment Trust. A social impact entrepreneur is from the perspective of my goal as an investor and developer and private equity person is that we should be able to do well by doing good. Doing well, meaning those who invest with me and come into my projects have an opportunity to invest in real estate, land development, those kinds of private equity deals that are large and lucrative and which ordinary folk usually don't have an opportunity to invest in. You'll know the types of buildings I'm talking about, those big apartment buildings that go up on an entire block in your neighborhood or somewhere downtown. And you think it'd be so cool to be able to invest in that, but you've probably only got enough money if you were lucky to perhaps buy retail one of the 1 or 2 bedroom units inside. Instead, what I do is I give people the opportunity to be on the front end of those deals where you get to put money in with those invisible developers so that your kind of return is a lot greater than those who come in and literally physically buy a unit inside those buildings. So my motto is to help people do well by doing good. As far as what I build, it's usually rental accommodation because we've got a drastic need for that in Canada, like many Western countries. I know in my homeland of Australia, we've got a similar problem of very high prices and constrained supply. Same in Britain. I was there earlier in the year. I was in Spain looking at projects as well, and in the United States too. I was seeing some numbers the other day that came out from the Parliamentary Budget Office, where it was predicted over the next 10 years, we'll need about 3.5 million new homes built in Canada over the next 10 years if we're to catch up to where we need to be. And the prediction by the Parliamentary Budget Office was that we would only build 2.9. And that's with the federal government's plans to boost housing production in the country. So even with Mark Carney's government proclaiming they will assist house building across the country, it still looks like over the next 10 years, we'll still be short of about 400, 500,000 homes at that particular point. That's where I come in because I am here to create terrific places for people to live and to create terrific opportunities for those who choose to invest with me. And on that theme, I thought I'd show you a couple of the projects that we've done in recent years. I do a lot of investing in the Okanagan part of BC. So you might have heard of Kelowna if you're from out of province, and perhaps Penticton, Vernon, Summerland, Peachland. They're all cities/towns in the south to North Okanagan area of BC. What's unique about them is the amazing climate because and topography. We've got enormously long, deep lakes, which are perfect for boating, swimming, fishing, whatever you like. There's a reason why Penticton was for many years the home of Ironman Canada, the triathlon race, because you could swim, ride, and run with ease in this area. And in fact, the sport of triathlon was actually born in Penticton. The photograph that you'll see on the screen is of a project that we finished construction on in December. It's called Lake House. It's a little different to what I normally do because it was built with a partner, and because it is lakefront land, it counts as luxury accommodation, not as rental. So every now and then, when I get access to some really blue chip land, it doesn't make sense to put rental housing on it because the return for investors will be much greater if we make it available for much higher end clients. And so in many ways, when we do these kinds of projects, they help also deliver funds for financing the rental portfolio of building multifamily rental. What you'll see here on the image is the lakeshore of Okanagan Lake. If we go down and around this bend, you'll actually head towards Kelowna if you keep going up towards this way. So when you follow that mountain range, there's lake all the way along. When we got this land, it was completely vacant, new and empty. And the reason for that was that the land had been stuck in legal limbo for about 15 years. So if I'd had a photograph of it from 15 years ago, you would see just grass along the foreshore, no buildings. But right about here in the background where those yellow trees are, you would see a long line of very expensive, very appealing modern homes that suddenly came to an abrupt halt about where I'm moving my cursor now. And that's because the partners who had bought the land, got it for cheap many years ago, they had built up to that point, and then there was a falling out among the partners. One of the partners departed, took their money and departed. Another partner came in, and unfortunately, that new partner, who they were meant to work developing this remainder that we built, turned out to be a bit of a crook. And so there was a lovely asphalt road that cost about $5 million that extended here through the dirt with beautiful curbing, lovely lamps, all ready for a residential structure to go in. And it was just dirt and scrub because that new investor in that joint venture took about $5 million and basically embezzled the money. And so that meant they'd lost their money. They had to bring in another new partner to try and finish it. And again, they made a poor choice on that partner who turned out to be incredibly difficult to work with, a very challenging person, a very challenging business partner, but also a person of significant wealth. And so he was happy to fight with his other two partners for a decade and a half, refusing to sell, but also refusing to play along with any development plans. He basically let the land sit. That created an enormous opportunity for myself and my business partner, Jason. Jason had connections to the divided party of three that owned the land. And he led negotiations between the three that, after some very long and tortuous and difficult conversations and negotiations, eventually saw us take control of the land. That allowed us to put in these 42 luxury waterfront homes. Our luck hadn't completely turned, though. I had raised $1 million, in fact, $1 million plus, and we were just getting ready to send out all the subscription documents for signing to our investors, and that was in February 2020. And as you recall, February 2020 was when the COVID pandemic swept in and absolutely everything shut down. Pretty well, all the investors that I had rounded up panicked and decided not to go ahead with their investments. I pleaded with most of them to stay put because nothing had changed in terms of our economic rationale for the development. There had been no alteration to the land. There was no flood. There was no earthquake. It simply meant that life would go on at the same valuations once we got over the pandemic. And the problem was no one knew when that would be. Initially, when I was teaching at UBC, we thought 1 or 2 weeks we might be out of the classroom and then we'd come back in. And I had the same thought as far as this development went. Instead, it turned into, the best part of a year, and then with a lot of restrictions for another year after that. So by the end of 2020, we had a much better handle on how to develop this piece of land because we went through a sitting and waiting process. We did lots of behind the scenes development planning for our development permits. We just couldn't really get boots on the ground. We did have a few people that were going in helping with forming when we finally got started again in the new year of 2021. And by that point, as I had expected, the real estate market across the country had not only rebounded after the sudden decline in March, April, and the beginning of May 2020, it turned into the biggest, most amazing real estate boom that I think this country or the world has ever seen. People suddenly wanted space. They wanted to get out of where they were living to go into new houses, new apartments, to buy rentals. So the demand for real estate, coupled by incredibly low interest rates, which the federal government and the central bank supported because they wanted to bring inflation down, or they wanted to boost spending, rather. They wanted to boost spending because all businesses were closed. So you make money cheap, people borrow money, and then the economy keeps going. Uh, that had the knock-on effect that all those people who I'd recruited, my everyday investors, were locked out. We had a couple of large retail investors who stuck with us over the 1 year. They had the research departments and the wherewithal to know we just sit tight to get back into this when we can, and they took over pretty much the entire investment allocation for this particular project. Once we got building again in about the Marchish of 2021, we wrapped up development in December last year. Our final challenge has been that although we started at the beginning of a boom real estate economy, we're now in a very much... Sorry, did someone say something? Nope. So we are very much now in a very down real estate market. And so for this particular project, we are selling these. They won't be rented out. On a rental, a bad economic market doesn't really affect me because then I hang on to the units and rent them out. I just need a couple of months to stabilize the property while I find new tenants. Very different when you're selling property, though. There's no profit to be paid out to investors until the last unit sells. We've got about a dozen of the 42 units that are still up for sale. We had pre-sales going last year, very slow. Nothing's been selling across the Okanagan market. We're reselling again at the moment. We've begun our campaign. I don't really think we're going to see a flood of new buyers until we see interest rates significantly move down. It's not as if interest rates are enormous right now. I'm old enough to remember when interest rates were 15, 16%, 17%. I can remember as a teenager being able to get GIC deposits being paid 16 and 17% on that money. That's going back into the 1980s. And so our interest rates are nothing like that in comparison, but compared to what we've had recently, when you could get a mortgage in the 1 point something, I've got mortgages in the 1.8 range that still have a year or so left on them. You can see why buyers are allergic to coming in when rates will be around about 5 that you would pay, between 5 and 6 right now. And so we have to just sit and wait for the market psychology to shift, for people to see and feel the economy improving, to see the central bank reducing rates, and most likely to have a little more stability coming out of the United States. The Trump policies on tariffs on Canada also affect me as a developer because that will increase the cost of building. So I've got to take that into account. It also affects the feeling of positivity and, how would you say, optimism of investors for them to put money down. Something I always like to remind those who invest in real estate, though, and in fact in investing in anything, is that you have to overcome the power of your own emotions. And what most people do when they invest is they like to buy when prices are high, because that's when they feel optimistic about the economy. And when the economy looks good, prices are up. And when we feel pessimistic about life and the economy and our job security, we tend not to invest, even if we have the money for it, because psychologically, we feel like it's not a good time. We all know the adage, you should buy low, sell high. So that means each of us has to overcome that inbuilt negativity compass. When I feel badly about the economy or investing, I have to remember that's just an emotional, psychological reaction. It's probably the best time for me to get some of the pricing that I want to have an exceptional return on my investments. I'll show you a few more pictures of this particular project. So you'll see Okanagan Lake there in the background. You'll see the mountains on the other side of Okanagan Lake. This is the very beginning of the development. So this was the lovely road that existed for 15 years, the road to nowhere. We built everything inside this piece of land. It's about 6 acres, 5 to 6 acres worth of land we've got there. This is us looking from the other direction, going back the other way. If you know the area at all, this is the highway in the background. You're very close to get to the highway which goes to Kelowna and Summerland in that direction. And about 20 kilometers down the road to the left is Penticton, which is where I'm speaking to you from right now. Here's a view of some of the buildings viewed from on the water, one of our drone shots. Slightly different perspective. This time we're looking out to the water. That pretty well takes in, there's still some development on the left and the right ends we couldn't capture in that photograph. But it gives you a pretty good overview. It's right on the foreshore. There is a walking trail in the trees here. So the houses are tucked in behind the trees, and there's a walking path through the middle of them, and there's a beach that you can walk to just over the back. Another project, which I'm also partnered with my friend Jason Bender on, is in Vernon, which is in the North Okanagan at 580 Commonage Road. This is a very, very different multifamily project. This is an enormously focused, future-orientated dream development. You'll see up the top there that we've got 350 acres. 350 acres of that gorgeous land that you can see in front of you. This rural road running to the right of my screen is Commonage Road. In the background, you will see Vernon. And we are actually on the crest of a hill. And on either side, there are lakes. And I'll just run through a few of the additional photographs to show you how dramatic the scenery actually is. So there's one of the lakes on one side. And I think that one's Okanagan. I think on the other side is Kalamalka. Kalamalka Lake is distinctive because it has a very unusually unique kind of aquamarine blue color to the water. When you drive by it in the summer, you just stare at it. It's like a blue sapphire shining in the sun. And it's something about, I believe, mineral deposits in the soil underneath. What we're doing with the 350 acres is we're going to be having a long-term development project where we will sell off some of this land in the remote areas. It will still be attractive as farmland and ranching land. We are going to, or have proposed to the city of Vernon to create an entirely new subdivision, like a satellite town outside Vernon. It's very close to Predator Ridge, the luxury resort and golf course, and about 10 minutes to drive down into Vernon itself. We are not going to be putting luxury housing in this area, unlike on Lake House. What we plan to do is we will create small plots of land, which will be leasehold. They'll probably have 99-year leases on them. And you will then have the option to put on there a small sized home, not a tiny home, but a small sized home. And we will be developing a portfolio of those small sized homes. So you can select from our portfolio. I would like this model with this number of bedrooms in this shape. And then we will be able to manufacture them and deliver them and pop them on site. You would own the home, so you would buy the house. You would have leasehold on the land for 99 years. If you decide after, let's say, 10 years, you would like to own, you would like to sell, then the house belongs to you. You have the ability to sell the remainder of your lease, let's say the 89-year lease. You can also sell your physical house. But because it's a tiny mobile home, you can also say, I'm going to take my house and I'm going to put it on a brand new piece of land I've got somewhere else. You have the option of being able to trailer it out and pop it somewhere else. These won't be your typical side-by-side. They're going to be very well appointed, quite high-end. But because they're smaller homes and because they don't have to be stick-built on site, they're going to be far more financially affordable than if you were buying a house with owning the land, let's say in Vernon. We think we'll appeal to a bunch of different customers on this one. We think there'll be a lot of interest from downsizers out of Calgary, Alberta, Edmonton, and also out of the lower mainland of Vancouver. We have an enormous subpopulation in the Okanagan in the warm weather from Alberta because we've got these lovely lakes, we've got lovely warm weather, and we're within driving distance for most people who are in Alberta. We also think we'll get some new first home buyers coming in. It'll be their first jump onto the ladder. We think we'll have investors coming in who will not only invest in the project, but buy a plot or lease a plot of land and buy a house, and then we'll use it to generate rental income. And overall, we have had a positive reception from the planning department at Vernon. There is consultation going on now in the public sphere. Of course, you never get completely positive feedback on these things. There are concerns that we're building in a rural area. So that's going to be one of the areas that we will most likely have to address. How do we create housing in this area without making people too upset about the fact that we're doing it in what is right now quite a lovely wilderness area? That will be one of those negotiation trade-offs that every developer has to face when you are building in a new location. So let's go to something completely different. This is more the meat and butter of what I do with Red Gum. This is a multifamily rental project that I finished in January a year ago. This is Orchards Boulevard in the south of Edmonton. It's not actually 350 acres. It is much less than that. So let me get rid of that. Where you see me standing, it's a brand new development in a brand new subdivision. All the houses you'll see in the background there, they are part of my project, so I built those. They've now been rented out for the better part of a year to a year and a half. They were constructed with the help of CMHC, with the federal government, and so they've got preferential financing through the MLI Select program. Also, not an easy thing to do. Lots of paperwork, lots of backlogs. I was fortunate enough to go into the MLI Select program when it was relatively new, when there were better opportunities and it was not so expensive. Now, on my investing opportunity that I'll mention at the end of this in Summerland, I most likely will not be going through CMHC MLI Select because the cost of that money I find is now a bit too expensive. I've got to, through MLI Select, have the government involved in the properties business for 10 years. So you can't leave for 10 years. I've got annual reporting requirements. I've got to make sure I can indicate a certain number of houses that are qualify for affordable rents. It's just some extra bureaucracy and costs that I probably will not choose to go through on my next land development project, which I'll tell you about at the end. I'd like to give you a bit of background now about how I got into real estate. You'll have noticed from my accent that it's a bit of a funny one. I've lived in a lot of different parts of the world. I grew up in Australia. I did my university there. I left in my early 20s. And I went to Germany to work as a journalist and a foreign correspondent. The year was 1989. I'd been working for the previous 5 or 6 years as a journalist in Melbourne, Australia. I was a newsreader and a journalist just running around with a microphone on my attached to me, talking to politicians and neighbors and basically gathering all the kind of news that you would expect in a city of 3.5 million people. I had always wanted to travel the world, though, and I'd always been particularly appealed or attracted to Europe, especially Germany. And so in November 1989, I left for Germany to accept a position as a journalist. And if you've got a memory of history, November 1989 was the exact month that the Berlin Wall came down. And so I found myself quite fortuitously going to Germany at a time when the remnants of World War II were officially coming to an end. Germany was divided into two countries at that point, the communist east half and the capitalist west half. And you had the Cold War going on between the Soviet Union and the Western world led by the United States. For me, as a young man coming over as a journalist, it was an enormously fascinating time to be there. When I was at university a couple of years previously, I'd actually written a paper for my European history course discussing the division of East and West Germany and trying to answer the question, could those two countries reunite? And the conclusion of my paper was no, East and West Germany will never unite because that would require Moscow's support. And for Moscow's support, that would mean the end of communism. It would signify capitalism has succeeded and it'll never happen. And then, of course, within a couple of years, I was proved completely wrong when Moscow did not send in tanks and guns as it did with other countries after World War II. They tried to push out the Soviets. And literally overnight, crowds began to gather at the Berlin Wall on September 9, 1989. And it was the time of Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the president of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was introducing policies such as glasnost, which means welcome, meaning welcoming the outside world, because the Soviet Union, like China, was then a completely closed society. It was very hard to travel out except to other Soviet countries. And perestroika. And perestroika was the Soviet policy of we need to modify. We need to make the economy more responsive to the needs of the people, because the economy in the Soviet Union and the East Bloc was really moribund, and it was very hard to get basics inside that economy. What ended up happening, though, because of those changes introduced by Mikhail Gorbachev, they aroused passions inside their own citizens and the citizens of the satellite nations of the East Bloc, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, the Slav countries, the East Germany, Latvia, Lithuania, just the list goes on. All those countries that had been annexed by the Soviet Union after World War II, their citizens suddenly realized something was changing. The wind of change was in the air. And literally one night, a crowd gathered at the Berlin Wall in Germany, and the guards at the border didn't know what to do, because normally if you approach the border to East and West Germany in large numbers, there was a likelihood you could be shot by East German border guards, who were told it was life or death at the border, and they were holding back the fascist hordes and the Nazi hordes, same way that Vladimir Putin justifies his war in Ukraine by saying they are fighting fascists, using that same World War II poisoned language. However, on this particular night, all these citizens, rumors spread that the wall was breaching, that crowds were gathering at the wall. There was a single guard standing at the border who went inside and said, "What do we do? Do we shoot? Do we not shoot?" The guard was told only Moscow can give those orders. And the guard apparently called Moscow, and they said, "We have no instructions." And so one particular guard at the border then basically went outside and lifted the gate. And all the West Berliners began flooding across the border. And through that unique moment of citizen power, where people had no clue that's what was going to happen, the Berlin Wall suddenly came down after 3.5 decades. It came down in November 1989. It was put up in August 1961. So this was the context that I was introduced to as a very young man coming in as a journalist. It was an incredibly exciting, fascinating time, because nobody knew what was going to happen. Would the Soviets come marching in? Would they change their mind and send tanks and troops? Would they order guns to be shot at the people who are crossing the border? The day after that happy day, would they suddenly try to revert back to the way things were? If we go back in time, I think it's worth looking at how this situation came about, because the Berlin Wall is a relic from World War II. So this is a photograph of the Americans and the Russian troops, where they met each other. The Americans were fighting, coming in from the west. The Soviets were coming in from their side, and they literally met each other at the Elbe River. And it's that Elbe River that forms the border between East and West Germany. If you look at this photograph, it essentially is this wiggly line that I'm tracing, and the river kind of goes off on its own somewhere, and then we eventually get over here. So the red is the Soviet, and other colors. The Brits got their piece, the French got their pieces, and the Americans got their pieces. So when Hitler was defeated, the invading armies literally said, "We'll carve up the entire country and take chunks for ourselves." And then here is Berlin. You will see it is rather awkwardly situated right in the middle of the Soviet sector. So the French, the Americans, the British were not willing to give up control of the capital city. So an arrangement was made where we'll just break up Berlin into different pieces too. So the French got this bit in the north, the British got this bit in the west, the Americans got this chunk in the south, and the Soviets kept this entire eastern side. Problem was, however, that as you'll see here, Berlin is stuck in the middle of Eastern Germany, and this is a heavily fortified, militarized border. You could not go across this border at any time unless you had special permission to do it. And so the Soviets tried to choke out the Western power from Berlin, they refused any land crossings to bring in food, fuel, etc. And so in, I think it was 1948, 1949, there was something called the Berlin Airlift, where the British, the Americans, and the French and the Allies had every few seconds planes landing and leaving Berlin's airports, bringing in everything they needed to supply the people of Berlin. And so that is why divided Berlin managed to stay inside a complete sea of Soviet East Germany. So this is all fortified. You can't get through it. And right around the city itself, it was completely fortified. So this dotted line represents the Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall was put up in 1931. I'll speak for about another 5 minutes, Julie. And then we'll have Q&A. So it was built in 1931. So the war ended in 45. 51, they put it up. 61, they put it up because they found they could not keep people inside the Russian zone. People wanted the fun and the consumerism offered by the West, and they would just literally walk across the street and go live on the other side of the border. And so East Germany was losing its population. To stop that, they put up the wall. This is a very famous photograph of an East German soldier at that time who was a border guard defecting. We know he's East German because of his eggshell helmet. Right here, he's at a border crossing, only rudimentary barbed wire between the East and the West. But he timed his departure, took a big running jump over the barbed wire, and it was captured famously by a photographer on the Western side. Here's a look at what the Berlin Wall was like. This side we know is the West because it has graffiti all over the wall. If you're on the West, on the Eastern side, the communist side, you couldn't get that close to the wall. These buildings were on the Eastern side. Many of them were bricked up because people used to live in some of these buildings and they would jump down out of the windows and escape into the West on sheets to get to the other side. There were even occasions where people built gliders inside these buildings and jumped out the window and glided across to the other side. Many people were shot and killed in the middle of this zone. So on the east, you couldn't get near the wall. On the west, you could go right up to this, which is why it was covered in graffiti. Here's about 1961, 62, the very first rudimentary beginnings, literally from one night, from the 12th to the 13th of August, 61. Builders came out, began throwing blocks on the ground, and you'll see it cut right up the middle of streets. So there was no rhyme nor reason as to why the war went where it did. It was basically where the Soviet troops met each other with the Western troops and how they divided up the city. So all these photographs will show these apartments and these little kids and families. The war became part of their daily life. Here you'll see the workers slapping up the first rudimentary wall. And you'll see Westerners used it as a spectacle. They had no clue it was going to be decades. Entire families were separated. In fact, the wall ran through the middle of some buildings. One part of the road in the building would be communists in the east, and the other half would be in the west. And in fact, there was even a rail line, one of the underground U-Bahn rail lines that existed before the war, ran subterranean underneath the city, and part of the rail journey had about 3 train stations that went underneath the communist sector. And so the West continued to operate that rail line, but those rail stations on the east side were completely bricked up for 30, 40 years. And they were like time capsules. And when the train entered into those stations from east to west, all of a sudden the lights in the train would go dim. There would only be a single light bulb burning in the empty station, which had been bricked up from the top, so no people could get in or get out. And the train would never stop at those stations. They were called ghost stations. So it was rather eerie being on the train going from one part of West Berlin to another, having 2 or 3 stops where it would turn into a ghost train going through ghost stations, and then speed up once it came back under Western territory. This will show you that the Berlin Wall turned into more than just a singular wall. It was multiple walls. So we're viewing it from the west. You'll see East German soldiers in that middle zone, which was called the death zone. If you were wanting to escape, you had to get through this particular death zone over multiple walls. vehicles with soldiers would patrol. There would be watchtowers, like this particular one here. There were automatic rifles that were motion activated to shoot anything that got in the way. There were guard dogs roaming, and these devices here are called hedgehogs. They were put in place to stop tanks because the East was always afraid that the West would bulldoze their way through with tanks, and so those hedgehogs were put in the ground as a barrier to stop that. Now we come to 1989, the wall came down. So November 9, this is going to be a day or two afterwards. You can see the shell-shocked look of the East German border guards. They have no clue what's going on. You can see on the other side, these are all the Western tourists. They are forlornly protecting the whole. So the wall was built up of these panels, and they had a leg on the bottom of them. So it was easy to push over if you were coming from east to west, but it was not so easy to push if you were going the other way around. But this got pulled down by the crowds. And just to prove to you that I was there, this is me as a very, very young man in my early 20s at the Berlin Wall. I'm sticking my hand in from the west to the east. That would have been grounds to be shot by a border guard in the past, but it would have been unlikely because that hole would never have existed. It was created, I got there a couple of weeks after the wall came down, and that hole was created by people in West Berlin who took their chisels and their hammers out and started smashing holes in the wall. Just for one, to breach it, to show that it could be done, but also to break off pieces to keep as souvenirs. That was what the tourists were doing. So here I am going along the wall, looking through into the west. There's one of the old signs, "You're leaving the American sector," written in the multiple different languages. On the other side, it'll tell you which sector you're entering. It would have been either the French or the British. I quite boldly rushed up to an East German border guard, grabbed his hand and shook hands, big smile. When you were crossing the border before the wall came down, there was no chance you would have got a handshake, a smile, even a remote human reaction from these border guards. They were trained to treat Western visitors as the absolute enemy, and they were like robots, and you would never have been able to physically get near them. You would have been dragged away. So I made a point of giving this guy no chance by rushing up and having a friend with my little brownie photo camera to take a photograph. This is 88. This is before the Berlin Wall came down. This is a friend of mine, and in the West, you used to be able to climb these makeshift lookout points and have a look over the wall into the eastern buildings. This is now after the wall came down. This is when some Easterners were coming across the border. This was the peak of East German engineering, the peak of Soviet engineering, these two types of car. So you couldn't buy a car in East Germany or the Soviet Union unless you went on a waiting list for 15, 20 odd years. And when you did buy a car, you could only buy one of two, either this model, the Wartburg, or this one, the Trabant. And they were of such appalling technology. The West Germans used to call the Trabant the stink bomb. That's the Stinkbomber was its toy name, called it Trabi. And they used to joke that if you got a model with rear window heating on it, the only reason it had rear window heating was to keep your hands warm while you were pushing it. There's another photograph. This one was taken by me as well. This is in 88, before the wall came down. You can see how drab and awful it looks. This is now the middle of Berlin. This is bright, shiny, built up, the walls completely gone. It was a total wasteland left after World War II when the city was divided. There's a couple of Easterners. You can tell from their old-fashioned clothing and haircuts that they didn't look very modern. That's their Trabants. They must have been quite well-off citizens to have been honored with one of those. There's an East German person who's looking at me really in an upset fashion, as is the East German border guard, because I took a photograph of him at passport control at a makeshift crossing when he was coming across. So you can get a bit of a sense of the anger and annoyance. This one's an interesting one, though. I took this at the famous Brandenburg Gate. Here's what the Brandenburg Gate after the wall came down. It's the only section where there's a big, broad top section that's flat that you can stand on. And there's all the people in the West standing on top of it. This was me on the bottom just after the wall came down, and these are two East German border guards, one of them quite significantly flashing me the peace sign and smiling, which was unheard of. There I am. Some people handed me a mini sledgehammer, and I'm going to try and smash off my pieces of the Berlin Wall. That's what the wall looked like in most places. A flat, straight panel going up and a rounded concrete piece to stop people like me from climbing up, balancing, and walking on the top. And then, of course, as capitalism does, it takes over. So this is the irony of a piece of the Berlin Wall that's in the middle of Berlin, blocking off an entire street from east to west with an apartment building on one side. You'll see this is on the east. So there would have been the rest of this apartment building, but it got blown up and just concreted up. And this apartment building was here in the west. So there would have been people inside there. Of course, as soon as the wall came down, marketers saw the opportunity to get up some billboards. Because when I was in East Berlin in 1988, before the wall came down, what was unusual about it was there was no marketing. There were no signs, there were no billboards, there were no flyers, there were no stickers on windows, there was nothing. Marketing was unknown. The only neon light I saw in all of East Berlin was for the state Soviet-owned oil company, and it was on top of one of the big hotels. And just to give you an idea of how things have changed, there's a colorized version of the Berlin Wall. We kind of saw a shot of that one earlier, and that's what it looks like now. All right, so I thought I'd quickly finish up for a couple of minutes because I don't want to go over the hour. This is the investment opportunity in the multi-family space that I have on offer right now. It's in Summerland, BC, which is also in the Okanagan. I have a 1 acre land assembly. 1 acre land assembly, very large piece of land, very close to downtown Summerland. We're going to be raising around about 1 to 1.2 million. We've already got 550. And this is open to accredited investors, friends, family, and close business associates of me, the educated investor. It can handle registered funds. It's through Western Pacific Coast. You will be an equity owner receiving preferred shares. The investment is registered with the BC Securities Commission. It's of a much higher caliber than the type that will be offered by most developers who will offer just JVs or promissory notes. This has the support of being fully overseen by and regulated by the BC Securities Commission. It has a preferred return of 13% annually. If you're unfamiliar with Summerland and BC, this is what it looks like. It's the same area where the Lake House project was. In fact, Lake House is just down here around the corner. This is Okanagan Lake. And this is the actual plot of land I've got. So the entire left-hand side here adds up to 1 acre. And it's already zoned for 6-story, high-density residential buildings. So I don't have to go to any lengths to try and change the zoning. It's already needed for high-density residential. Here's a look at the 4 buildings that are on there right now. I plan to lift those up, take them off the property, and take them to, I'm hoping, a First Nations reserve, because First Nations are often needing to put in real estate houses onto reserves. They often don't have the financial resources for it. We have a company here in BC that has the ability to come in with giant trucks. They cut the houses off the foundation, they stick them on the back of a truck, and they can float them up rivers, over waterways. They drag them down the street, they pull up the power lines. And so I've got the benefit of not having to demolish, not having to pay for demolition, not having to do abatement, being environmentally friendly because I'm not throwing all this construction material into the landfill. And it, in turn leads to a better return for the investors. Something significant that I'm working on right now for this project is including an integrated medical facility. Summerland is a smaller town with an older demographic, but it's very close to Penticton, Peachland, West Kelowna, and Kelowna. So it's got quite a sizable urban area that people can work in and still come back and live in this lovely rural town. So that's what makes it quite special. You have a rural quality of life, but you can still have an urban lifestyle and work. They unfortunately, though, about 20 years ago had their hospital shut down. And so there's no real primary care facility. And the small GPs and other practitioners in town are getting to an age where they're going to age out, and it's not certain they'll get replacements. So my hope and my goal is that on the ground floor, on maybe two of the four buildings I expect to build, I will put in an integrated health facility. It will hopefully feature GPs if I can recruit them, but chiros as well, physio, chiropody, all those paramedical services, if we can get them all into one space, we can have housing above where the practitioners can live. It's walking distance to all the shops in Summerland. Um, and it would have an underground car park, so those who wish to have a car can still have a car to go to Penticton, 25 k's away, Peachland, 25 k's away, West Kelowna, 40 k's away, Kelowna, about 55, 60 k's away. So if that interests you, there's the rundown again. We've got more than half of the money raised. I open up small tranches for investors as we need additional funds to continue our development permit project. And there's a reminder of who I am and how you can contact me. Really, that's me
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And with a history lesson.
with a
That is
history
a,
lesson.
I'm going to tell you, Cameron, that's the first. Real estate all mixed up with history lesson. Unique. I appreciate it. Thank you. And it makes me feel very grateful and blessed that we live in where we live. I don't know about you, but boy, you saw some stuff.
Yeah, you can't believe the things that people abroad are exposed to when you grow up in a fortunate country like Canada.
Yeah.
And just for comparison, Ukraine, where the war is right now, it's only a few years ago that they were staging the world's biggest sporting event, which is the Soccer World Cup, and now
Mhm.
it's a war zone.
Yeah. So I hope everybody can take a moment to count your blessings and to pray for everybody that needs it. Um, okay. So I don't think I have any questions. There was somebody that asked if you'd be willing to part with the land overlooking Kalamalka Lake, but then he
Part with the
left.
land. You're going to have
So,
to come
so
up with
I'll
40
connect.
million or more for that one.
I told him that your information would be, I'm gonna, if it's okay with you, I'm gonna make sure and share all of your contact information when we send out the recording. That way people can reach out to you if it's something that they'd like to talk to you more about, which is great. Um, I think what you're doing with that Commonage is so innovative, really innovative. So pretty exciting. Um, and then let's see. I've got a new question from, oh no, that's Curtis. Yeah. Just Layla's commenting. I can understand what Cameron lived through. She grew up in a war-torn country. Yeah, so everybody, just like I said, count your blessings. Um, I think the best thing is for you to type into the chat or raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. We've got 6 more minutes. We don't need to use them. I think we have a lot of information here uh, from from Cameron, so thank you very much for that. Um, and yeah, I personally got a lot out of it. I actually had a question. I thought it was interesting what you mentioned about MLI Select. You're gonna opt out of that because it's just too restrictive.
Yeah. So, I
Yeah.
mean, at the very beginning, you must have put some project through MLI Select, have you, Julie?
No, we've never done MLI Select. In fact, we only did CMHC back when we did assumable mortgages way back in the early 2000s. We've primarily done regular banking. Yeah, not CMHC.
Oh, just a little background on that. I mean, MLA Select, it was a bit of a gong show when the program first came along
Mhm.
because no one really knew how it was going to work. So they were always tweaking it. And there was this sudden, if you got in early, you got the best terms of all. But then all of a sudden there was a months long wait. And so, when I was building on one of my projects, I got stuck in like a 3 or 4 month wait period, but I had contractors and everybody to pay off. And
Hmm.
so I was in this limbo where I was legally obliged to close, but I couldn't close because I was subject to financing and I had my financing together, but I had to wait until someone at CMHC picked up my application from the 3,000 that they had sitting in the computer.
Hmm. It, it's it's no joke. It's an adventure in and of itself from what I've heard from everybody who's done it. We have Pierre Paul Turgeon. I don't know if you know him. He regularly he speaks usually once a year to our group. Comes over to the Okanagan from Alberta uh, for a holiday and then comes speaks at our group. So we've learned some things, but it's a fascinating topic. And just congratulations on all of your success, and also congratulations on persevering, being able to sit tight. That's the perfect word for what's going on in a lot of the world right now is sit tight because things always change, and if you can make it through this, what I kind of am calling a bit of a winter in the Okanagan, as far as real estate investment season, you'll be stronger for it. And it just sounds like you've been able to weather some storms and you have a unique perspective just on life overall. So I appreciate that. And I'm sure everybody here appreciates it, and everybody that's going to listen and watch this recording does as well. So thank you very much. Is there anything else? I don't see anybody raising their hands. I don't see anything in the chat. I'm sure we're just going to get a lot of thank yous. Um, Anything else you want to mention before we sign off?
No, I think all the best, everybody. As Julie said, when you're investing, the best decision is quite often is stand still and do nothing, because we all get a little caught up in the whirlwind of change around us. But investing is a go slow project, not a go fast one.
Hmm. Certainly. Wise words. And then just reminds me of the words of Franklin Delano Roosevelt: real estate cannot be lost or stolen, nor can it be. Oh, shoot, there's one other thing. I forgot that part. But regardless, he says, it's just about the safest investment in the world if it's managed with care and paid for in full. And all properties can eventually be paid for in full, even if it takes 25, 30 years. So keep that in mind, folks. All the best. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Yeah, we have a bunch of thank yous for you. Thanks again, Cameron, and I hope we get to see you in person soon.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Yep, take care.